Hey everybody, welcome back to the House of L. This is our episode for the Peacemaker Season 2 episode, Another Rick Up My Sleeve. I'm Derek.
I'm William.
Another William up my sleeve?
Another Man of Tomorrow?
Well, yes. Let's segue into that very quickly before we talk about Peacemaker, because at the time of this recording, granted, we've gotten to see several of these episodes up front, so we're recording in advance of the episode being released tomorrow night. But as just a few hours ago, we got the news of Man of Tomorrow that Gunn and DC Studios dropped. So the next installment in the Superman family saga, as he calls it. How are you feeling about that out of the gate?
So I think it's interesting. Gunn had been teasing this for a little while now, saying on the Peacemaker red carpet that we were going to be hearing about what was next sooner rather than later. I didn't anticipate it to be quite this soon, candidly.
Mm-hmm.
He was also very keen to say that this project was not going to be a direct sequel to Superman, but was going to feature some of those same characters.
Mm-hmm.
The teaser image that Gunn shared is really cool. It's a Jim Lee piece of art that features Nicholas Holt's version of Lex and Corin Sweat's version of Superman, with Superman standing shoulder to shoulder with Lex and Lex's power armor, which is something we've never seen in live action before, but have certainly seen in
Not
various other
cinematically.
forms. Yeah.
Not cinematically.
And there are a couple of Superman is holding a screwdriver and has there are a couple of loose screws down near Lex's feet.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this
And that was one of three.
One of three, yeah. David's shared one, and Holt shared one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Each by different artists. To me, this feels... I'm of two minds about this. One, I think it's really cool that Superman seems to be getting his own sequel, or getting a sequel that does not now necessarily tether him to Batman. And I think exploring the Lex-Superman relationship is going to continue to be a very, very fascinating angle. I do think it's interesting that as of right now, Rachel Brosnahan did not share any of these images, so it appears that as of now, the only two confirmed cast members returning will be Holt and Corin Sweat.
So Hollywood Reporter has confirmed that Rachel is appearing.
Oh, did they? I did not see that.
Yeah. But that leads me to my next topic when you get to your point.
The initial reporting that I had seen was that that they couldn't confirm, but Isabella Merced also shared the teaser image and said something to the effect of "See you soon." Mm-hmm. To me, it feels. I'm curious to hear what you have to think about this, but the way in which they're positioning this makes it seem like it's going to be a two-hander between Lex and Superman having to team up to take down some larger threat, with the potentiality of the Justice Gang, plus or minus a Peacemaker or Aaron Pierre's Green Lantern having to team something up. It feels too early to do like a big Justice League movie. To me, it doesn't make sense to do a retread of like a Batman versus Superman or a Justice League this early on in the scheme of things. I like the idea of it being a very much a Clark and Lex story about having to team up for some larger threat. Who or what that might be. We could have a Brainiac here. That would be cool. But I don't really know where that is headed. But I do like the idea of pairing the two of them together. This notion of it being part of the Superman saga and not necessarily direct sequel to Superman, that's what maybe has me a little bit more curious about what it might be. But what is your... I've been talking a lot at this point. What are your thoughts?
I've every time he said it's not Superman 2. That's kind of what has been his baseline. It's not Superman 2. So it has me like, okay, is this a Lex movie
Yeah.
Basically, is this a Nicholas Holt star and David is, second billing or co-lead, um, and is, Luther, the man of tomorrow. I think of that
Hmm.
line. I think it was from Supergirl of he was never the man of tomorrow. I was, Lex saying that. And my issue here is, of course, I love that it's just a random Wednesday and we get, to find out that we're going to see Superman on the big screen again in less than 2 years.
It feels like it should have been a little bit more fanfare than that, but also I do like the idea of just dropping it during the middle of the day. It's kind of
New
fun. It
York
gives us
Comic
something to.
Con's 5 weeks away. You would expect. I fully expected to wait until we were out on physical media before we were
Mhm.
getting a tease of what was coming. But there was so much marketing and promotion for the last film based around the Daily Planet and Lois and her agency and everything, and I feel like we obviously didn't get nearly as much in that as I thought we were going to get based on everything we saw in the lead up. Not to say that she wasn't well utilized or anything like that, but um
I
I
could
just
have seen
wanted.
some. I could have seen some more. I think would be
Yes.
my
Yeah, well,
takeaway.
and that goes for the Planet crew all over, because I think they
Mhm.
they cast a wonderful group there, that gelled really well together, and the stuff that did happen on screen was great. But then, obviously, we just now knowing in interviews that I've done and everything how much was left out. So I see, David posting this image of he and Lex, and I see Nicholas posting this image of he and Superman, or their counterparts, and just all quiet on the Western Front from Rachel. And I'm like, she was second late, she had second billing in this movie, and I'm like, what are
Mhm.
we? Are we? I know it's not a Superman sequel, but there's that. Most people say the DC Trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. My DC Trinity is Superman, Lex, and Lois. So I just wonder how in a Lex Luthor movie where the rest of our characters are and how they're doing in this. I mean, of course, I'm excited because I loved the movie this summer. I'm enjoying Peacemaker very much. I'm so looking forward to Supergirl, so I can't wait to see what's next for these characters. I just, it was very much like I was driving and was at a red light and was like, "Hey, new movie." It's like, what? 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 We, we haven't said goodbye to this one yet. This one's still in theaters. Um, so I'm just excited to see more, to find out more information. I know there's already rumors, and I'm like, they just posted pictures today. Why are we having rumors that Peacemaker's in it and Supergirl's in it and Lobo's in it and all this other stuff? And I'm
I
like,
saw those as well.
yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. But and I'm not saying the Kents need to be in a Luther movie, but I do feel like Lois needs to be in a Luther movie. So I hope that I think finding out that we're making a movie about Superman and Lex Luthor that's not a Superman 2 just raises more questions than it does answers at this point. And I think anything speculating on it is just opening yourself up for either disappointment or getting your hopes, or setting the bar low so your hopes are even better off when you find out information. But I'm fully into this universe now, as I said, and I'm looking more and more forward to all installments. I haven't heard anything I don't like. I'm still, there's that part of me, and some of it's eerily reminiscent of the DCEU, because I remember, when those lineups started coming, it was like, okay, and Suicide Squad. It's like, we're getting a Suicide Squad movie before we're getting a Batman movie or what have you. And I've kind of felt like this here, because it was like, we're getting a Clayface movie before we're getting it's,
Yeah.
so there's some kind of echoes of that. I don't think they're on the same threat level. And that's probably not the right terminology, but
But
as far as what to be concerned about from what came before and what's happening now, because this does feel far more cohesive. Just, three pieces in between Creature Commandos and Superman and now Peacemaker than what we had previously. So I am cautiously optimistic and hopeful is where I'm at after the news today.
You do bring up the DCEU announcements, and that is one thing where I would like to have a little bit more clarity on what the potential 5-year plan is, given what Gunn announced originally and where we are now. Those timelines are very different in a lot of ways. It sounds like we're not getting this Authority movie. It sounds like that was one of the scripts that was axed because they just couldn't figure out what it is that they wanted to do. We've heard nothing about Swamp Thing. I heard a rumor that there was potentially someone that they wanted to do that movie who they thought wasn't interested, and then they gave it to Mangold, and then that other director said that he was interested in it.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
And was so I don't know what's happening with that. James Mangold's also supposed to be doing his Knights of the Old Republic, High Republic Star Wars movie. Who knows if and when that is actually coming as well. He also did just so I have no idea what's going on with that. I don't even know what Mangold's next project is. Well, actually, no, I do. He's doing the Chalamet motorcycle Heat movie for Warner Brothers or Paramount. I can't remember, but
that's with any of these things, especially when it comes to Star
Paradise
Wars,
Lost,
Disney, Paradise Lost.
There are a bunch of other things that. So I don't know if Gunn is planning on coming to New York Comic Con or doing something separate at the top of next year, like he did 3 years ago, almost at this point, when he announced this initial slate. But I get that things are in flux and things shift and things change, but I think I would like another circling of the wagons to understand where it is we're going to be moving forward. So
I would love to see Fandom come back, because
I thought that was a great event, and that was actually kind of around this time in previous years. We've had that. I remember writing about the Batman trailer for GQ at where I was at a music festival, and that music festival was at the end of September here in the DC area. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be great. I think we've seen through events like Fandom that you don't necessarily need a Comic-Con to make a bunch of news. You can define yourself in your own unique corporate friendly environment. So it would be really interesting to see, again, to your point, that come back in some capacity. But it just, not that James Gunn needs to explain everything he's doing to me, but there was such a big splashy slate announcement that feels like it has changed significantly. I just at some point I think would like to see how that's updated, and I would imagine that given at this point, a lot of that is in flux and has changed, and they're in a position where they just can't fully announce what's next until everything's a little bit more solidified.
Most likely. And with some of these, I'm always like, okay, I'll believe it when I'm sitting in the theater, especially when it's come to Star Wars titles these days. Like that, the announcement, I guess filming began the other day on Starfighter?
Monday, I believe.
Yeah. And I'm just always like that. Yeah, sure, Jan gif from Brady Bunch. I'm like, well, I'll believe it when I'm sitting in the theater. And so, yeah, there was kind of that when Gunn announced Gods and Monsters, there was that, bevy of, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. I'm like, let's see how Superman goes before we get too ahead of ourselves. And now it sounds like there's been a bigger push for Wonder Woman. Since the release of Superman. Batman, I still feel like, no pun intended to the title of this episode we're about to talk about, I still feel like there's a trick up the sleeve somewhere. I feel like something's coming with that, whether it is a merger or not a merger. I'm not a merger bro, so I can't speak to that. I'm fine if it happens. I'm fine if it doesn't happen. I think I'm probably one of the few that's in that camp.
Yeah.
If and then I say that to the uneducated that may be listening on that, it's discussing whether or not Robert Pattinson's the Batman is the Batman of the DCU, or if they're going to keep that into its own Elseworlds thing. A
I
lot of
think
people seem to be wanting that to happen.
yeah, I think it's pretty telling that what feels like would otherwise be a pretty easy slam dunk, which is a major Batman movie, has not materialized. It feels like Andy Machetti's pretty busy or has been busy in the Welcome to Derry side
Mhm.
of things for that upcoming HBO Max series. Again, Machetti's a relatively well-known name. I can't say that I personally loved The Flash, and I can't say that he would necessarily have been my first personal choice for a adaptation of Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's Batman and Robin per se, but
Yeah.
I also do think it's quite telling. We have heard crickets on that, and it sounds
Hmm.
like Machetti has potentially moved on to other things as well, reading in between the lines of his interviews, and even things that Gunn has mentioned to Rolling Stone is he said never say never, but as of right now, that's not what we're doing. But things change and things shift. I do think it's quite interesting that we will be getting both Man of Tomorrow and the Batman Part 2 in the same year.
Within a few months of each other, which is just
It's what,
wild. When
July
have
and
we ever
October, right?
July and October? When have we ever had a standalone Superman movie, whatever this may be, with Man of Tomorrow, and a standalone Batman movie in the same year? The closest we've come is Superman Returns and Batman Begins coming out within a year of each other.
Yeah, like 11 months or whatever.
Yeah, both were June 2005 and 2006. So
And I mean, if I'm Marvel, I'm sweating a little bit about having two high profile DC movies coming out within that quick of one another while we're still,
mhm.
it sounds like, figuring out what it is on some level we're doing with Secret Wars and Doomsday. So yeah, I don't know. Very interesting stuff. I do like the idea of just putting these two actors and these two performances um, back together on screen, whether it is, to your point, a standalone Lex movie with a supporting Superman performance or whatever it might be. I do think those teasers kind of suggest the idea of some sort of team up, and I find that very, very interesting. I think we'll have some better clarity. It sounds like Lanterns is going to be a little bit more of the connective tissue about what this kind of overall potential larger threat to the
Mhm.
DCU may be. So I'll be curious to see how much of Man of Tomorrow does or does not end up touching on that in any capacity. But yeah, hell of a way to start September.
It's also, I mean, I love that the three of them got each had their own art to use,
Hmm.
and I thought it was really neat. I just you drop a title like Man of Tomorrow and you don't say Superman Man of Tomorrow, or it's not a colon or a secondary title. So I don't know. With all the limited information, I feel like talking about it too much is just doesn't do any favors. But it does kind of segue what we're talking about in this episode a little bit because of the Lex of it all. And I think I said this on our episode with Dane and you and me reviewing Superman. I was really surprised that we got to the end of that movie and we already had a Lex Luthor being incarcerated, just out of the gate. Was a bit surprising to me. I figured it was going to have more of a kind of like Thunderbolts did. You thought you had him, and then surprise, the press is there, and it was all a ploy kind
Yeah.
of thing. So I was kind of expecting Lex to talk his way or get his way out of that one somehow. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't like, I've said this, I love that we actually get a Holt, a Lex that we love to hate.
Hmm.
So often we, root for Lex, like with Rosenbaum and stuff like that, and you want Lex to, be good, or he's campy like Hackman. And so for once you've got just this major a-hole. I mean, shot, the guy in the pocket dimension. And I don't really like championing him teaming up with Superman this version because
Yeah.
he didn't. That's not something I really want to yay about. But at the same time, we do have all three of the art, as you mentioned, has the power suit element, which is something fans have been clamoring for years. It's been done on television. Some cases better than others. Mileage may vary, but to have a fully realized cinematic version of that with Holt at the helm of the suit does pique my interest greatly. But to have Lex already incarcerated and so, he's got to be released somehow. Something's got to happen, whether or not this is public enemies kind of thing and he dupes everybody and ends up becoming president, or they're teaming up against Brainiac or whatever it may be. It does sound like the two of them are going to go shoulder to shoulder against some other threat before ultimately Superman is double crossed, I'm sure. And, Lex is.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely. So, and then the Lex of it all with the pocket dimension and Superman does come up in this episode yet again with Peacemaker. It was now when we recorded the second episode, I had watched the third one. It has been really hard not to go forward here, but I wanted to have have you watched 4 yet?
No.
Okay, so I wanted to have a healthy discussion about this episode without being spoiled. Because I feel like there were just some things. I mean, it's a pretty short little episode. You've got
38 minutes. I
38 minutes.
I rewatched it maybe an hour before this recording this evening.
Yeah.
3/4 of which is an extended action sequence, which I think is quite good, especially on a television budget that I think has
and needed after the last two didn't really have huge action set pieces at all.
I would say that sight unseen, with the exception of like whatever is allegedly coming in 6 and 8, that this is probably where the majority of the budget went to as far as action for the season, and certainly was well spent. We have plenty of helicopters and tight corners and fun gags. The copier printer cart gag, and it was pretty well done. But again, the majority of the episode is this action sequence with the Sons, and otherwise it really is just Peacemaker and Chris getting acclimated to the best dimension ever, right? And getting us finally getting a little bit more time inside of that, outside of these just fleeting appearances as Argus.
Glimpses.
Yeah, as Argus circles the wagons and gets ready to really fully come after Chris with everything that they've got. So, including Michael Rooker.
Michael Rooker's first appearance of the season.
So, to your point, it is very straightforward. The one thing, and I think you're kind of getting ready to touch on this, is again, the mention of the Jarhead. We felt pretty unsurprisingly that this was going to be Rick Flag. I did not expect the 3 years earlier cold open. That is really, I think, the maybe a little cheekily so, but I think the thesis of this season is what is Chris willing to burrow a hole through the middle of the earth? Is Chris willing to tear a dimension or tear a black hole across space and time for Amelia Harcourt? And as on the one hand, I think not even on the one hand, I really like what I like about Gunn, and what I think sometimes maybe people rub against is how much he wears his heart on his sleeve. And this is really like the ultimate wife guy move, is to basically say, I would rip a hole in time and space because of how much I love my wife. And that's sweet and endearing and it works on me. I think that's great. But that scene between Harcourt and Junior at the very beginning, I mean, that's what this whole season I think is going to come down to. And they're planting that seed early. And I think it is that is really, I think, the biggest takeaway from this episode is what Chris's continued involvement here is going to potentially do to these two worlds, and will that decision, will it be worth it to do that, knowing how much he cares for her.
I was surprised out of the gate because there was no like reveal of Rick. He was just there. I mean, literally, you see him in the opening shot with the flashback of Harcourt getting out of bed. Clearly, they're having, he's having an affair, not so much her, but he does have
with June,
with
with my girl,
June
with
mention.
Cara Delevingne, the
Yeah.
only part of the or of Suicide Squad that has been acknowledged at this point, I guess, outside
Yeah.
of Rick himself. Which it's interesting that she gets the nod here. Although
I
again, I
know.
think we're
I
coming
thought that
closer and
was.
closer to the Harley of it all. I'm sure, but yeah, interesting
I,
to piggyback that part of it and nothing else.
yeah. But clearly, he's been sleeping with Harcourt. They say that they're the only friends that they have, and they've screwed that up. And then obviously you ship out to Corto Maltese in 2 hours, and then obviously we see everything else with that. So that adds a whole other layer to the onion of what's going on with Harcourt and Peacemaker in present day, and what has been going on between the two of them since Corto Maltese. Because, she obviously harbored feelings for Rick, and Chris kind of took that away from her in a way.
Kind
So
of.
that's, I hate he was and wasn't brutally killed in cold blood. I go back and forth with that, and I go I'm it's
It's a little
kind of like
gray.
the whole yeah, and it's kind of like the whole Lex thing too. Like I really want to root for Peacemaker. I want to root for Chris because he really is trying to better himself. He's
I
far
think
less the a-hole that he was in season 1, and I do think he's trying to better himself in those ways.
And I think that growth and development, I think, really stood out when juxtaposed to Earth 2's version of Peacemaker that we, don't see, obviously, because he's dead, but hear about that he was somehow, not even somehow, he was in so many ways worse than our version of Peacemaker, which I didn't think was possible. I think it's the contrast is interesting here. I think for as well received as a hero Peacemaker is in this universe, it sounds like personally he is just like a real douchebag. And not
Yeah.
that our version of Chris isn't either, but I think we have seen, especially throughout the course of season 1, that he has a capacity and an aspiration to be better than he is. It sounds like this version doesn't really have that same desire, despite the fact that he is perceived as I'm painting broadly here, like this dimensions version of Superman, right? Like is
Yeah.
someone aspirationally that there are murals to him, and he has the key to the city, and he's being written about in newspapers, and everybody really seems to love him. All the people at Argus dig chatting with him, right? So the contrast between those two things are different. But then again, you dig into the personal side, and he's he's drinking, which is fine, but he's abusing drugs, and it very clearly is, as she says, fucked around on Harcourt,
Hmm.
and so I
Hmm.
think there is, I find that contrast very, very interesting between those two things, and how our Chris is going to continue to try and square those two aspects.
You called it Earth 2, and that's something we've been calling it. But after watching this episode, I initially felt the urge to call it Earth X. And I don't know how you feel about this or not, because we've not discussed, but I'm interested to hear your take, because the element of, well, the grass is always greener on the other side. And yeah, everything seems so hunky dory on this earth to him as he comes in and witnesses it all. Are the Nazis in power on this earth?
You're not the first person to bring this up, and it would, I think that's a really good theory. And the fact that there's talk of the Suns being aiming to liberate, and they're taking down
Liberate from
government.
their overlords,
Yeah.
and words like, and then there were a few other instances where I was like, it's, I know he's like, Augie's the blue dragon instead of the white dragon on this earth, and there's stuff like that, but I'm like, are we praising, like, or is it just, are you gonna find out that, yeah, it seemed like everything was great here, and oh my god, it's so much worse?
I mean,
Like,
I
yeah,
think
you're
that
popular and you're beloved, but also look around you, and he hasn't ingrained himself enough in the world yet to know those things. I mean, he's talked to Augie, he's talked to Keith, and he's talked to Harcourt and a very bumbling, goofy Rick doppelganger, and that's really it. Like, he's not looked at newspaper headlines or anything like that. This quote unquote terrorist group. They're targeting government operations like the DMV and HUD
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And it's just I'm watching and I rewatched it after I watched it, and I was like, I I wonder if that's what we're getting at here is, yeah, you thought everything was going to be so much better here, but really it's even more of a nightmare than what you could have imagined.
I mean, dramatically speaking, I think that makes a ton of narrative sense to have it be this thing where it is almost Chris just cannot have a stable relationship with his family in any way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. And even though on paper and behind closed doors, it all is hunky dory between Chris and Keith and Augie, they are actually vile, awful people,
Hmm.
and Chris will have
Have
to kind of make
profited
those
off of all of this and very wealthy,
exactly.
living
Now,
and stuff like that.
yeah, and Chris will have to come to terms with that and either choose to, I don't know if we'll be as literal as to kill his father and his brother again, but certainly kill off the possibility of having those relationships to be, at the very least, right? To close the door on this and lose that potential because of the possibility of this dastardly evil that is existing. But again, from a storytelling standpoint, that is absolutely the decision that I would make is to have it be this thing that seems very. I mean, even the downtown feels very quaint. It reminds me not entirely unlike of of downtown Greer in Greenville, South
Mm.
Carolina, which feels very
Hmm.
quaint and very small towny and but is I'm not saying that my hometown was hiding something more nefarious, but
They
that's not the
usually
case.
are.
That's not the case at all, but it seems too gilded to be true for sure,
Hmm.
down to the way that it's color graded and lit. It feels very Green Acres in a way that just
Well, and I
doesn't
mean, you've
square with what we should expect from the Peacemaker side of the DCU.
right, and you've got him, popping wheelies on the peace cycle and getting flashed, and kids saying he loves them, and I'm just like, something bad has to be brewing here because it can't all be sunshines and rainbows. Because
Yeah.
then where's the draw to bring him back? Once what I would imagine happens, whether it's Argus coming in after him or it's the 11th Street kids crossing the threshold and coming in after him to this earth to this dimension, there's going to have to be some reason that he comes back.
Well, not even necessarily some reason, but like what is it past trying to cultivate this relationship with Harcourt that keeps him there? I think is really
Right.
the biggest thing. I think that was the thing that I found interesting about the end of the episode is the fact that even after deeming this the best dimension ever, he still consciously makes a decision to return home. Now, is that
Hmm.
because he's gathering his things to turn around and move there
I think
permanently?
based on the
Right.
text, I think based on the text he sent Harcourt, and having that heart to heart with Keith, that's exactly what he's doing. He's returning home to close up loose ends and to go and shut the door behind him. I think
Yeah.
and I think there probably will be something that's more of the final straw that breaks him that makes him go to that decision. But as it stands now, I think it's very much all right. Well, I'm moving this way. Let me go back and see how things are over here. Because if he goes back and talks to Amelia one more time and she shuts him down one more time as she
Yeah.
has recently, it's not going to take much more for him to choose the one that does want to be with him.
Right.
When everything looks so much better
Yeah.
through those rose colored glasses.
And I would have to imagine that before that he goes back, there will be some sort of confrontation between him and Senior. Like, if there I think that has to be also
Absolutely. And then you've also got that element because there is so much mourning of Rick Jr. and we know that there's a Rick Jr. over there. So or that I
yeah.
mean, one would believe that they would cross paths at some point
Hopefully,
before
I
all is
do
said and done.
I hope so for no other reason than to get Senior's reaction to this particular almost like,
Milk toast,
Peter
Rick.
like, Peter Parker version, like, fumbling,
Hmm.
bumbling, or, like, it's so I've always really, really liked Joel Kinnaman. I don't know how much,
I do too.
um oh, what's the Apple TV show that he's on? For All Mankind,
For all
which
mankind.
I'm
Yeah.
a couple seasons behind on at this point, but I really loved his performance in
Hmm.
that show in particular, and so it's cool to see him subvert that personality a little bit. I think in the Suicide Squad, he has to be the straight man in a lot of ways
Hmm.
to all the absurdity that is happening in that movie, and I think he does that quite well. But to have him play more of this comedic role, I thought that tone worked really, really well for him, and so for no other reason, I wanna see more from that perspective just because I think he's having that oafish doofus level of performance for the character, I think works really well, so I was happy to see that. The trash can gag where he runs into the trash can and then yells about who put the trash
I
can there or
told that
whatever,
doesn't go. I told you not
that
to put
doesn't go
that
there.
there. Yeah,
I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I think it's just nice to have him back. It's cool that really out of all of the things that could have been brought back from the DCEU, that Kinnaman's one of them, and that's
hmm
really it's interesting that he gets to be the one that kind of is that through line through everything. Uh, what a come up for that guy. I'm happy
he's
to
one
see
of
him.
my favorite parts of the Suicide Squad too. I really
Yes.
enjoyed how Gunn what did with him there. Um, Also, some very interesting things about this Earth. When Chris does go to Argus and the security guard is talking to him, he asks him how Mr. Grant's tests were. Wildcat?
Maybe.
Uh, who else is? Why else would we be talking about a Mr. Grant? I don't. That's the only Mr. Grant I can think of in the
Who's
DCU.
older,
Yeah,
who might have some and I mean, we know Wildcat exists, right? He was one of the
in
heroes in the
the
mural in the Hall of Justice,
on the
so
other Earth. Yeah.
yeah.
So that's I heard that, and then let's see what other Easter. Oh well, and then the conversation between Adrian and John in the bathroom talking about spider eyes and not, which his bless his little autistic heart, Adrian. My God, the confidence in which he spouts off spider facts and owl
2
facts and
sets.
yeah, eyes two sets. But then he says Martians only have one eye. So I'm like, all right, well, there's is that a Martian Manhunter? Is that our Martians reference?
That would be cool, especially if they're going with the absolute Martian Manhunter design,
Right,
that I think has the one eye, which would be cool.
right.
Yeah, I mean, Derek, if I was drunk in a bathtub, we've been drunk together in places, but if I was drunk sleeping in a bathtub, which would have to be a large bathtub because I don't know if your listeners have seen photos of you and I together, but I am quite tall. I think I would be okay if you took my pants off and washed and folded them for me. I think I'd be okay with that.
I would take your pants off and wash them for you. I absolutely would. No
Thanks,
hesitation.
man.
No
I think it's weird.
hesitation.
It's just the pants. I guess it's so he
I thought
doesn't,
it was weird. It's just the
potentially.
pants. I everything happening off screen in that conversation. Hearing economist Retch as Adrian was trying to shove his fingers down his. I'm checking for vomit. Just like that whole. Why would you do that? John is I is John. Me is John. Like everything John says, I'm like, yeah, that's if Derek was in this situation, this is how Derek would be
I've got to say,
reacting. Also,
the decision to. I am always a fan of a. This is the second time we're going to bring up Popstar on this podcast in as many weeks, but one of my favorite sequences in that movie is the bee torching sequence because whatever,
oh
if
yeah,
they
yeah,
had decided to actually film that, it's never going to be as funny as what your brain imagines
no,
when you're in a
no,
sequence where you're just hearing but not actually seeing something. And I think anytime that happens, wasn't there a sequence in season 1 where that happens where it's like there was some James Gunn thing I watched maybe where it was like there is a character goes off screen to do maybe it's in Guardians, I can't remember. I feel like it was a James Gunn show of some sort, but someone goes off screen to fight a bunch of things and then comes back and it's just covered in blood. And
I feel like it's I feel like that happened in the Suicide. Man, I don't know. I get
maybe it did happen
confused
in the
so
Suicide
easily.
Squad, but anytime that happens where you hear just the noises of explosions or gunfire
Right.
or whatever the case, or people dying in gruesome ways, that is always so much more interesting to me and is a better execution of that than seeing whatever that would have been. I People sometimes can maybe think that that's a cheat, but I love just being able
No.
to fill in the
Well,
gaps of that. I think it's so effective as a storytelling
There's
device.
Nathan and Peter fighting Siler behind a closed door that we've
Yeah.
been waiting 3 seasons for, and then there's Tim Meadows and Andy Samberg with flamethrowers fighting
Yeah.
the queen bee. That's there's two different things there. I do have the
Yeah.
vinyl of Popstar that has the art of
Oh,
that
yeah,
on the
yeah.
inside, which is fantastic. That's neither here nor there.
I think that's the cover on my 4K steelbook
As the
that a
steelbook
buddy of
too. Yeah,
mine got
yeah.
me, is that one. But yeah, to your point, a replacement for a 3-season narrative climax is not how I would
No,
necessarily execute that
no.
as a one-off gag in the middle of an episode. Great bit of fun, and to your point, Steve Agee retching in the background is like way funnier than anything
Then seeing it.
that
Yeah.
than seeing it for sure.
What else? This Mighty Crab Joys exist on this Earth, on
I
Earth
did see that. Yep.
X or 2. We
Yep.
see how the giant billboard, as Chris jumped from one building into the DMV to save the day. There's a couple references about him not wearing his suit, which I guess, but everybody seems to know he's also Peacemaker. So I didn't understand if there wasn't so much a hiding the secret identity kind of thing there. It seemed like.
Yeah, I think at some
Um,
point, and this is maybe not the time nor the forum, but I do want to have a discussion about I think it's going to be a little bit more of a thing in the DCU than it is in the MCU, which is the complete reversal of like secret identities is a storytelling device that I find, or not even a device, a decision that I find very interesting. I guess
mhm.
part of having to constantly deal with that tension, just at a certain point, it gets maybe frustrating to have to do, but I found it very interesting that with the exception of Miles, or not Miles, of Peter in the MCU, and even then for a long time that has ebbed and flowed, but like no one in the MCU really has a secret identity. It's something I'm observing, and I'll be curious to see how the DCU continues to explore that as we move forward. I mean, obviously, I
Same.
think Batman and Superman will have a key part of those things, but everyone else seems to be fair game. Um, the only other thing, oh yeah, crab joys exist, but the Kardashians don't.
Which I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll go to this Earth too, if we don't have to deal with Kardashians over here. So some pop culture references, we talked about that in last week's episode, of things that might or might not get carried over to the DCU. So the Kardashians are one of them, evidently. Yeah, I'm just super interested to see what this, when you've got, because we've had no other mention of heroes, right? So what is Argus backing up here? What are they? Because it doesn't really seem like Chris has got an ID, yeah, to get in to, or retina scan. He can access Argus, but what is their goal? Like what are they doing behind the scenes?
I
Where
mean, I
is
think we're in.
Superman? Where all
Yeah,
all these questions. So I don't know. It's all. I read one thread that was like, "Oh, Ultraman's going to end up on this Earth," and I'm like, we're connecting. That's too much connective tissue. We're not. We don't need
yeah.
all that."
It's
Um,
also very clear that I think we are certainly going to see ancillary supporting characters from Superman make an appearance in the show,
yes,
but
something we also
that
talked about
is
last week.
that is something where it's like, to your point, Ultraman feels like a bridge too far. Like that's this still needs to be inherently rooted in Chris's story. I think it makes
Hmm.
sense to have Otis or some of Lex's, or maybe even Lex himself, show up in that capacity, but it needs to be rooted in Chris's narrative struggle and what he's going through and what he has been through, and Ultraman just doesn't really square with that. Um,
Hmm.
Again, I think the personal is key here, and even with the, like, crazy hypothesizing we did last week about redoing the Suicide Squad, or, like, whatever,
Right.
I even wanna walk that back a little bit, 'cause I think after this week, it's just very apparent to me that this is it's cool to speculate, and it's fun to speculate, and that would be awesome if those things end up happening. That would be great, but I don't want that to come at the expense of dealing with the personal stakes for Chris, because I think that is what the show does so well, and as long as we're still orienting everything and orbiting everything around that, that's fine, but the that cold open was a good reminder. It's like, oh, at the end of the day, this is really going to be about kind of that Chris and Amelia relationship and how that functions and how that works. And can these two people, find a way to kind of love each other or have some sort of respect for one another? Or I guess they already have a respect for one another in some ways, but like, can they truly exist in this harmonious way? And what might the two of them do to find that connection?
Do you think we're going to find out more about this doorway, not the specific one that leads to this Earth, but the the quantum realm dimension that they've had hiding all along? Because it does kind of just feel like not even a MacGuffin, but it's just it it has become this. Oh yeah, we just have this thing, and there
Yeah.
was never really an answer for it in season one. You kind of got the inclination that Augie built it because he was so good at building like the suits and the helmets and everything, but they've kind of moved away from that now, and I'm wondering if we're going to get a look into, and if that somehow ties in with this Earth, of how this doorway came to be.
I don't know if I necessarily want or need an explanation of how it functions or exists. Do, I think, want some closure on this. I don't want to be in the business of making like overly declarative statements, but I think one of the things that it's just too early on in the DCU to be having so much multiversal stuff. And so I would
Mhm.
rather them, there is that shot in the trailer where it looks like Meadows is opening the door and sees the like head on the crab
Right.
mechanic thing or whatever. Like I would imagine we will get a glimpse or two of some alternate realities, and I'm sure one of those will be a very clever, funny gag that we'll probably laugh about and really enjoy.
And we'll probably feature one of those cameos that we're hearing
Exactly.
about, that it's just going to end up being a throwaway
I would love to
gag for.
see Ben Affleck as Kite Man. That would be really funny. But
What if
you know,
Cavill was behind a door? What
that'd
if? What
be
if? Just what
that'd
if?
be really funny. But
And
I but I
go
I
ahead.
want them to kind of go ahead and just like take that out of contention, take that off the
Yeah.
board after the end of the season. Like I do think I don't want there to be a point where it's like, oh, Chekhov's library door, or
Door.
that's the
Yeah.
kind of this get out of jail narrative storytelling device. Like I think it makes sense for the context of what this particular story is being used and is a way to mirror Chris's own personal journey. But after that, it's so tied to Chris and it's so tied to Peacemaker. I think that is where it needs to exist. And when it fulfills its narrative purpose to Chris's overall arc, I think it needs to be done away with.
And I don't think it needs to be hidden in Area 51, or in Argus's catalog,
Mm-mm.
behind a locked door. Like, to me, and especially if that world becomes a threat, if it is a Earth X type situation where, say, the Nazis have come into power or something like that, where evil is running. Wait a minute. Now, where evil is widespread and in control of things. That, okay, well, we have to destroy. If they're coming for us, we have to destroy this. Like, if we have to make it sure they can never get access here. So, that takes it off the board by getting rid of whatever the device is that makes this happen. It's not the keypad, I don't think, but
No,
the keypad accesses it, or operates it, but there's some
it's
other
like a
element there.
TARDIS situation. It's bigger on the
Right.
inside. It's a it is it is the world between worlds, if we're gonna use the Star Wars Rebels
Hmm.
reference here. Like, it does feel, again, the
And
bleed,
when
this
we
thing that exists out of
right.
time that allows you to have a physical representation of doors to other universes, right? But, yeah, to your point, I don't want this to be something that they can lean on as a
Mm.
storytelling device in the future,
Well, and I
and
think so many people out of the gate, especially when this trailer dropped, they were like, "Oh, this," because we heard so long leading up to Superman that Peacemaker was going to answer questions about what was canon and what wasn't. And then we heard about this alternate Earth. seeing that in early promos, and it was like, oh, so he's gonna jump back and forth between. I never really subscribed to that theory that it was gonna represent the DCEU and the DCU, because I feel like that's tacky.
Well, and also it's
Um,
very clear that Gunn he wants to move on from
oh
that
yes,
in
yes,
that
yes, yes.
specific way. It's just it doesn't, to me, honestly, the Doors even just being a part of it was him. I don't even know if it was necessarily as considered as, "Oh, I'm planning this as an Easter egg for season 2." I think it was just we need something for Peacemaker to kind of have all this stuff, so what if we
Hmm.
have this, like, TARDIS-esque thing? Oh, and it actually turns out that there are doors to other dimensions as part of this other
Hmm.
thing, right? Like, I do
There's
think it
99
was
other doors.
exactly. So I do think it was just one of those things where it was, like, kinda planted the seed as, like, a throwaway thing, now we can actually expand upon it, but when it's done, and we're not coming back to it. To me, Gunn is someone who's not afraid to kill his darlings when it comes to stuff like this, and keeping it around as a trump card in his back pocket just does not seem like something he wants to do for this, because it I think it makes things more complicated, and doing that at this stage, at this infantile of a stage, just doesn't make sense to me, but I could be totally wrong.
Well, and when you think about it, it's really the only plot device of the season.
100%.
Everything going on our Earth is just emotional drama.
Yeah.
Everything going on with Argus is because of this portal.
Mhm.
Like the portal is what set off everything. The cold open of him letting Eagly fly around, because he didn't want to go outside in the snow, set up this whole thing. So there's, other than Chris wanting to be better, trying to become a hero, in the face of everything that happened before, and getting rejected by Harcourt. Of course, he's looking through this window, at a better life. But I mean, really,
Through the
our
magnifying
entire
glass.
right, it really, but our entire focus has been this technology as a result, because it is giving him that glimpse at another life. So, um, it's interesting that there has been no real jumping off point for the season other than that. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm just saying, when you are forging a new world, universe, franchise, iteration, whatever you want to call it, in the DCU, and you're not, there wasn't really a cliffhanger with season 1.
Mm-mm.
So you had a fresh path to start from, and you do carry over this technology that again, I still feel like in some way is very personal to Gunn, of this, I was doing this and now I'm doing this kind of thing, and
Mhm.
looking at it both ways. And I may be misled in that, but I really do think it's in writing it. I do think it was him grappling with some of his, what got me to where I am here kind of
Yeah, I
scenario.
mean, who doesn't want to escape to another world where you're, like, totally beloved, especially after you've been through something where it's like, I was at the highest of the high, now I'm at the lowest of the low, and I wanna go back
Hmm.
to a world in which I'm on top again, right? Like,
Hmm.
that is, I don't even think that is, like, subtext, I think it's text, honestly, in a lot of ways here. So, yeah, I mean, I think pretty predictably here, the season's going to end with Chris realizing that he doesn't the grass is not greener on the other side, and he has everything that he needs right in front of him, and who
Hmm.
cares if he's a part of the Justice Gang or not, as long as the Leather Street kids care about him and love him. That's the family that matters, and those are the people that are most important to him.
And I feel like that's what's
How we
coming,
get there,
right?
we'll see. It has to be.
Right.
Has to be.
I mean, it's got to be a battle with, if Argus is coming against him, and we see what's, obviously we're left with a huge cliffhanger at the end of this episode. They've enlisted, um, Red St. Clair with Michael Rooker's character hunting Eagly because of what transpired in the last episode. They're coming for Chris. Sasha says every agent they have in the Pacific Northwest is descending on, uh, his house. So, it's going to be interesting to see. But I do believe once the 11th Street kids get wind of Argus coming after him, because John's going to have to turncoat, right? Like, he's going to have to eventually tell
I mean, he's gonna have to
Adebayo
make a
or
decision one way
Harcourt
or
that,
another for
yeah,
sure.
I mean, they obviously know he's been doing this, but he's going to have to go on the offense and tell them, okay, they're coming for him. Like, we need to help Chris. We need to go get him or something. So, um, it will be interesting. And Adrian keeps mentioning other versions of himself that I feel like that has to be setting up for something. There was like 2 references in the last episode, and then the trailer for the coming weeks has another. They're like in a cabin or something, and he's like, "I wonder if there's another me on that." Like, so I'm like, something's building there with him. I
Hmm.
feel like. Also, that poor man has got to be in his vigilante suit at some point.
Yeah, yeah, we haven't even seen that.
Because
I mean,
because
we've seen it in the opening credits more so than we've seen it in the
right,
actual
there is one person in the opening credits that I have no idea who she is. Have you noticed this person?
the older lady.
The older lady that looks like she's dressed like a cleaning lady or something.
Was she not in the first episode? I felt like I saw her very briefly as, like, someone that we just kind of
I'm
encountered.
gonna be really embarrassed if she was, and I totally glossed over that. Everybody else we've either seen or we know is coming. Judo Master, and so
'Cause
I
I think it was sort of like
the
I can't remember
neighbor,
the end
and
yes, but then
the
also
neighbor was in the season 1 dance, and then the janitor from the hospital.
that's what I said, the guy from
Yeah.
the guy with the mustache, the janitor from the hospital who he has that conversation with, he's in the opening
Hmm.
credits, so that's what I
Hmm.
just assumed it was. It was like some it
But
sounds
I feel
so
like we've not seen
derogatory,
her.
like
So
NPC who we haven't seen, who just,
right.
like, was a gag thing.
I mean, we even got the weird alien
Yeah,
in there. Um, so yeah, I'm interested to see what's through those other doors, because I do feel like that's going to be a gag. Because how do they know which one he went through?
exactly.
So we're gonna have to trial and error some of these, which I'm sure is like one of the, like when they've got the radiation suits on in the trailer and they open that one and there's like the skull, the one you referenced a minute ago.
Yeah.
Like I feel like those are gonna be those kinds of things. Nope, not going through that door.
Ben Affleck as
Those
Kite
kinds of
Man, you heard it
bits.
here first,
Ben Affleck as
100%
Kite Man would be,
guaranteed happening.
yeah, yeah.
They did Gunn is someone who plants his reference or plants his seeds very particularly. The fact that the very first thing that we see in the previously in the DCU is Kite Man. Like, we're going to see
Hmm.
Kite Man this season. Like, I'm fully convinced of it.
I,
I was kind of expecting for the Rick version in Earth 2 to be Kite Man. That was kind of what I was expecting here. It was like it wasn't actually going to be Rick and that Harcourt was dating Kite Man and we were gonna get a hell yeah from him, but
that
we
would be
didn't.
funny. That would be
Uh
funny.
at least not yet, so who's to say?
You got my hopes up now about things that could happen through other doorways, because how funny would it be if they opened a door and it was Affleck and Joe there as Batman and Deathstroke?
Yeah.
That something that was supposed to happen and that never did happen. So, you know, um, mileage may vary. That may go better for some than it does others. It may reek of what movie just did that? Oh, Wolverine and Deadpool, where he's jumping
Yeah,
around trying to
he's jumping
find,
around.
and
Yeah,
obviously Cavill's there, and
I also think Gunn is probably has made it pretty clear, I think, at this point that with the exception of his particular pet projects that he has, he's pretty intent on leaving the Snyder stuff
oh yeah,
behind.
yeah,
And I don't
and
excuse me,
should.
having Maginot or some of those guys and gals show up again, I just don't think does him any favors at this point. It would be cool if we do just if we saw Deathstroke, for example, right? And we don't necessarily know who it was, but yeah, I mean, to your point, I do think that where we see all those character cameos that are coming at some point are probably through those doors, but who and what they are, DVD.
And it may not even be a cameo. I know he doesn't like that word, and I'm using it, but an appearance
Appearance.
proper. I think about Chris and Superman was just on TV, like he wasn't
Yeah,
even there. I mean, that could very much do the same thing with Corn Sweat and have Superman on TV being interviewed
yeah.
about something Peacemaker did,
Yeah.
or
That would
something.
that would actually be a fun inversion, is that
It
if
would.
in Earth X, if it's Superman there or something along those lines.
My fear in all of this, though, has become, and I go back to what I said a minute ago about rooting for Chris so much and wanting, yes, he's killed people, but he's obviously trying to be a better version of himself, a better friend, a better man. And I don't know what the out for him is here when you've got all of Argus coming after you. You've got the father of the man you killed that set all of this into motion is the director of the agency coming after you. They've got somebody hunting your eagle your pet eagle now. Like I don't know how there's any, and you've got this whatever tech this is that they're trying to shut down after the Metropolis incident. So in what world does, I know the tagline is, in what world is he the hero? Which is a really smart tagline too. Or in what world are they the heroes? But it's also like, well, where does he get a happy ending at the end of this season somehow? Or
Yeah.
are we just kicking him? Are we kicking Peacemaker yet again?
I don't know. I think I think we're gonna get some real direction on that next episode. It feels like after this one, we're really building to a strong confrontation in 4. Maybe I'm wrong, and it's just another big extended action sequence. But it feels like the pieces are coming together to really pay off in a large way next week. So we'll see.
We will see. In the meantime, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search The House of L. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, anywhere, including our website, superhouseofl.com. You can listen from there as well. You can also follow us wherever you do your social media. We are at Superhouse of L, from anywhere from Instagram and Threads to Twitter, X, TikTok, Blue Sky. And you can email us, mail@superhouseofl.com. And we'll be back next week with the 4th episode, which is crazy because that means the season's already halfway over.
Halfway.
At that point, we've only got 5, 6, 7, and 8 after that. And up to that point, we will have only seen 5. So we're going to be right there in the trenches with you, 6 through 8, trying to figure out what's going to happen, because yet again, Gunn has said 6 and 8 are some of the most excited things he's done in his filmography, and specifically one sequence that he says he can't wait to talk about. And in 8, I think. So I'm excited to see what that is, because we do know he can get a little crazy with things sometimes. Obviously, we saw the huge orgy sequence in the season premiere. So hopefully, it's not a big superhero brawl in the middle of an orgy. That would be awkward, I think.
I don't know.
For me, at least. Okay, William's here for it. All right.
Yeah.
We will see you guys next time. Thanks for listening, everybody.